Hi, I'm Allie. Join me in working with these new wooden forms to create the directional earrings. These one direction earrings will have seed beads and check glass, as well as show you some techniques in case you want to see other forms and decorate them in the same fashion. Remember, if you need any materials, especially the new forms, which are exclusive to here, go underneath the video into the description, click that little down arrow or the show more button, and you can get links to our site with all of the products used in these designs listed. Gather up your materials and let's get started. So to get started with our earrings, we are going to be using these wood forms. And the wood forms are specifically designed to fit the exact size of seed beads that we're working with. So we're going to be working with our holes here are an opening for an 8 seed bead. And I'm using the Miyuki brand seed bead. That's the measurement that we're going off of here. And you can see here's the sample, the first one that we made with the form. Made it a little bit smaller so that way it's not as big in people's ear, and then we're going to add some color to the top. For this design, you can, if you want to, use the Dragonthread in a green color. I'm going to be using the gray size 6 because that's going to allow you to see a little bit more of that thread so you can see where the thread is going as we're teaching and designing this. I have 11 seed beads here, and we're going to start out by learning some brick stitch, actually put on the top of our earring and our wire guard. And then we're going to come down and fill in those open holes with just a kind of figure 8 version of threading. So to start out, what we want to do is take our dragon thread, and I have about 4 feet on my size 10 needle, and we are going to tie it onto the form. We're going to tie it onto the form by taking it here and into that top hole, which is going to be our smaller of our squares. So look at the directions. We want that one direction going up rather than going down. If you want to, you can totally switch it over and do the opposite. But we're going to start at that top to get that design look. And the first thing we're going to do is tie on our thread to our form. And I'm just tying it right here on the top, right onto the form. 2 little knots there. We'll come back and kind of burn that thread off. And we're going to go right into brick stitch. So I'm going to tie that thread and then kind of put it down right in that crease where my first little V starts to go up. Once it's down there, we're going to get ready then to go in and add some seed beads. So we're going to start off with brick stitch. If you don't know brick stitch, we have other videos we can put on the page on our website to help you out. But we're going to start out with 2 seed beads. And these 2 seed beads are going to kind of hang out right on top of that knot. Let those 2 seed beads fall right at that knot. You're going to take your thread and needle and go through the form. So we're tucking behind the form, up through the top here. And bead number 2, see how I kind of position my finger that those beads can't float down? Bead number 2, we're going to take our thread and needle back through bead number 2 and bring it out towards the top. So there we go. So bead number 2 towards the top here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get ready to continue our brick stitch right along that top of the form. To continue the brick stitch now, we are going to do 1 bead at a time. So we started off with 2, but brick stitch is going to progress to do 1 bead. Add a bead. Let that drop down next to the form. We're going to take our needle and thread again through the back of the form towards the front of the form. And bring that thread back up through that seed bead. The seed bead should be sitting. And see how it kind of pulls away from the project there? That's okay. It should be sitting with the hole facing up. So I'm doing that pull slowly so you can see how that thread goes in there. And that bead will just sit right there, right on top of the form. You're going to continue to add in your beads, letting them drop down next to the form. So underneath and through the form. Once you're through the form, back up through that 11 towards the previous 11 and that will get it to stand on its end. Push down and make sure to do a little tight pull, but give a little grace. These are wood, so you don't want to crack your wood. I'm going in here and I'm going to add another bead. So this is going to be bead number 5. And then that's where we're going to stop with our brick stitch here at the top, going through the form and then stop. So we have 5 beads on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we're going to do the very top. If you do not want a bead on the top, skip the bead and just use the wire guard. I'm going to take a wire guard. I love the look of wire guards at the top of the project. I think they make them look nice and finished. And I'm just going to slightly, ever so gently, hold the wire guard with my plier and just open it up just the tiniest little bit. And what I mean by open up is just make that section just a little bit wider. I'll give a little bit of forgiveness there. Grab my first 4mm bead, put it onto your thread and your needle. Grab your wire guard, go up through the wire guard through one side, it's a little U channel, and two sides here have a little closed tube section. Go up through that closed tube section, wrap your thread around that U channel of the wire guard, and go into the little tube on the opposite side. From here, I want you to go back through this same check glass bead from the opposite side. And what that's going to do is lay our check glass bead down along the side here of the project so that it sits basically right along the top. So the bead's going to sit also on that lateral. From here, grab your next one of your 11-0 seed beads, let it drop down next to the form, and we're going back to brick stitching on 5 more beads through the project, coming out the top here, adding that bead. And if you want to reinforce along the top where your wire guard is, now's the time to do that. Going back on the project, you add that little bead, and we're going to brick stitch right across to get that to sit right at the top of the project. From here, we have 4 more beads rather to go to create that brick stitch all around the side of the project. So once you're finished with the brick stitch section here, we are going to go in and we are going to do a figure 8 stitch. This is also used in the leather wrap bracelets. So if you know that, that's really great. Also used as just a regular sewing and other crafting technique. We're going to bring our thread in. It's coming out of that last bead there of my brick stitch, that bead number 5, kind of hanging out on the corner. And I'm going to tuck the thread around the back of the form and in toward the interior and just kind of let it hang out in there. In here, we are going to add 3 of our silver 8/0 seed beads. If you happen to have a form that's a different shape, different size, just measure out, or if you're using a different brand of seed beads, just measure out and see what fits comfortably. If you only have 8/0 or 11/0s, use 11/0s. Once we have those 3 beads on, we're going to go to the complete opposite side of the form. So of that first little arrow up, we're going to loop around. So you can see I looped around the back of the form, came up through the top, and you'll notice I'm not pushing those beads into place yet, because as soon as you push them into place, it's hard to take your needle through. So back through those 3 beads to the back of the project. And then we're going to go through the piece one more time, up from the bottom to the top. And now we're going to push them in to place and give a little tight pull. And look, that's not going anywhere. From here, we're going to sneak over to the other side of the piece and get our silvers going down this side as well. So we're going to sew through the form and just loop through one more time. And then we're going to go over through the form, and we're going to bring the thread over here to the side. Now again, if you don't want to see a lot of thread, you can use a green thread. You could even use a white thread and color it brown with a Sharpie marker. It'll come off eventually since some of this thread is thermally bonded, but it'll last for a while. All right, going on to the other side then, I'm adding my 3 beads, and we're going to lock that in the exact same way, going through the form. So starting at the top, our thread goes through the form. I'm just looping around that wood, going back through the beads now, all 3 beads, and back towards that top. Last time I was at the bottom, wherever your thread goes naturally works. Push those beads down in place, and now they are locked in there as well. Take your thread and needle from the top of the design here towards the back of the design and bring it out in the center. And now we're ready to do our next row. So this is going to continue as we do row by row of these beads. The next one is going to be 5 beads, and I'm using that matte silver lined light amethyst, picking up my 5 new 8/0 seed beads, letting them lay down kind of in the project, but again, not forcing them up yet, wrapping my needle around the wood along the side. So you should see that thread right along the side there. Going back through those seed beads. And again, wherever your needle goes, either towards the top or towards the bottom is fine. Pulling that thread through and then giving a nice tight pull. I'm going to go through that form one more time, bringing the thread towards the top just to kind of lock that in. And we're going to repeat those 5 beads. 5 more beads, and we're going to do the next side. Getting ready for the form, not pushing them down yet because I want to be able to get back through them. Add your thread through the side of the form, just looping around, then back up through your beads. And this time I'm purposefully going to take my needle and thread to the back of the project. Give a nice tight pull. And then once again, through that opening. And now we need to get our needle and thread down to our next section. I'm going to do that by going through my first row of 5 beads, kind of wiggling and moving them a little bit. Usually we're going to need to kind of move your needle towards the back. And then just like we did on the top, we're going to hop. So we're going to go from our first row, or our second row rather, into the third row, bringing the thread around the back. You'll just see it a tiny bit right there around the back. And we're going to do the same thing again, where we lock into place and kind of anchor on the form itself. I want you to do a row of our black beads, which are our Picasso opaque smoky quartz. And we're going to go smoky up and down, 5 beads on each. And you can see where my thread path is here, linking on to the straight line, coming around here, and then linking on to the straight line and linking on both. Then we're going to do a row of silver. Same deal, coming down here, doing our silvers, linking on, jumping over, link of silver, jumping on, and then we'll get back together and I'll show you how we're going to put our 4mm rounds in place. Once you're finished with your rows here of your directionals, you're going to go in and your thread's going to be coming out the bottom. I just finished this side of the silver here. And as my thread comes out the bottom, I'm going to grab my first of my 4mm that sits in the bottom. And what we're going to do is we're going to anchor that right to that top here. We want it to sit so that the bead sits the same as the bead above, that it's going to sit on that lateral. So I'm going in, adding the bead, and just like we've been doing, going around the form. So I'm sewing between the form, and then I'm going to go and bring my thread and needle through the bead. Once I have that bead lateral there, you can see I'm kind of holding it and pinching it down with my fingers. Go to the other side, tuck through the form about equal to the other side too. Try to keep my thread lines equal on the design. Back through the bead, that figure 8 stitch. And there you go. So see how that bead is nice and tucked up in there really, really easily. If you want to, you could even keep it open. It's kind of a fun other design, but we're going to go in and we're going to add some beads to the right and to the left of it. So 2 more 11/0 seed beads, or sorry, 2 more 4mm seed bead or beads, check glass beads, go on, and we're going to wrap around the form just like we've been doing. So bigger beads are the exact same. Wrap around the form, sew through those 2 beads again, bring your needle and thread out, and then sew through that middle bead. Let's just sew through that angle. And then once again, I didn't sew through anywhere else. I didn't wrap around anywhere else. I'm just grabbing my thread and needle to the top. I'm going to add 2 more beads and do the exact same thing. So this is kind of a lesson in anchoring to the form, wrapping around, and then going back through those beads and exiting. And I try as much as possible to make my threads match on either side. So as I'm looking up, I have 1 thread, 1 thread, 1 thread, 1 thread. And on the back, you might have thread kind of hopping and jumping a little bit, but it should be pretty consistent from one side to the other. After you have this last set on here, we're going to go back through that center bead as well to keep that kind of V nice and tight of beads. All right, so now I've got those beads anchored really, really well right there, not going anywhere. And what we're going to do is go to the bottom, and we're going to add 4 seed beads in one side to get the V and 3 on the other side. So I'm going to come back down through these side beads, and it might be a little bit tight getting your needle in here. You can just kind of wiggle it through. I do a lot of wiggling when it comes to the forms. And then once you're on the side here, we're going to get ready to add those seed beads. So 4 seed beads first go on. And there's 4 seed beads just like we've been doing. We're going to go right in here, anchor to the baseline, going around the form, back up through those silver beads. And just like we did previously, I'm going to take the thread and I'm actually going to wrap it around this thread line here. So this is a little bit different. We're not going up to the form. We're wrapping around that thread line. And once we wrap around that thread line, we're going back through those 4 8/0 seed beads. Once you're for those 8/0 seed beads, we're going to add some more seed beads. I'm going to bring the thread wrapped around one more time, back up to the top here, add my 3 seed beads, and then we're going to drop them in right into that interior. Just like we did where we're adding the 4 beads, we're going to catch on rather than to the form, to that bridge thread or the thread that's underneath those 3mm or 4mm beads there. We're going to wrap our thread and needle around. Oops, not there. It's too far up. We want to wrap around the bottom. You need to, and it didn't go in the right place, just kind of pull it and make sure that it sits in the right spot. And then we're going back down through those seed beads. Once I'm down through these seed beads to make sure that they are anchored in place, I want to show you to take your thread and needle and you're going to go around the form on this side, but we're going to sneak in between beads 3 and 4 from our left side. And then back through those 3 beads and up. So what that's going to do, kind of anchoring it between there, is make sure that that sits in our point. See how it's going to sit in that point right there as we have it going on. And just if you can, move that thread, pop that bead up a little bit on the design so that thread kind of sits in between. But honestly, gray thread, silver beads, you won't really even see it. At this point, our form is completely done. All we need to do is we need to go in and we need to burn off our thread edges and we need to tie off our thread. So this thread here is already tied off at the top. We knotted it on, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to go right in here, take my thread burner, my threads up, burn it down right next to the project, nice and flat. Then coming out over here to the bottom, I'm going to tie off my thread so that I don't actually see it. Once again, kind of sewing through and around that bridge thread, making a little loop. I'm going to tie off that thread by putting my thread and needle through that loop, giving a nice tight pull, burning that thread edge down, and then burning that thread flush next to the project, while making sure you're not burning the other thread that's there. The last thing to do is just to stick it right on your ear wire. Whenever you open those ear wires, open them through the side, put it onto your wire guard, and close it up. And you have an awesome new pair of these directional form earrings. Whether or not you go brighter, lighter, it really adds to the design element to play with colors on these earrings. I'll go ahead then also and stick them on so you can see how they hang and where they're working. Thanks so much for joining me in these One Direction wooden form earrings. It's a lot of fun to embellish and decorate, and hopefully this springs your imagination to really look at different components, different forms, different elements in a new way and see how you can almost bead embellish the forms and use them to create your own designs. Remember, if you do want to and you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much for watching, Potomac Beaders, and stay tuned for our next inspirational design.